I bought this tractor a couple months ago, and it has been great for working on our driveway. This tractor was sold to me as being in great condition, and as it's the first tractor that I've owned, I knew a lot of things to look for, but then there were other things that I didn't really know about when I bought it, and it's turned out that it's had a bunch of issues that I wasn't really planning on having to deal with. And one of them is the brakes. The brakes were terrible, and when I was going down the driveway, which is kind of steep, it's like 20% grade in some points, it was kind of scary to go down, and the brakes were really like screeching, and so I wasn't sure what was going on with that. And as it turned out, the brakes on one side were completely frozen and non-functional, and the brakes on both of the sides were filled with, I think, water. So I have been working on the brakes and got new shoes from Hoye, but I figured I would show a little bit about how the brakes work in case maybe it's useful to somebody else. So first, maybe I'll talk a little bit about the way that the wheels go on here. And I have a feeling that this kind of thing is really obvious to people who have been working on tractors for a while. And it's pretty simple, but I never found any kind of video really showing how this worked. When I bought the tractor, the guy told me, yeah, it's kind of tippy. It's not very stable. And I read on Tractor Forum people talking about, oh, you can change the position of the wheels, and I didn't really understand how that worked. So I think I'll grab a flashlight and I can show you the way the wheels go on, and I ended up spreading them out as far as they can go, I think, and makes the tractor way more stable. What you can see here is the axle on this tractor is hexagonal, and it fits into this hexagonal hole here in the hub. Now the hubs right now are on backwards, or at least, I think this orientation would be considered backwards. So normally this plate here would be on the other side of these rims. You can see here, these are the ends of the bolts that are holding these two things together. So the bolts are coming through this way. So if we look on the back, these are the bolts that go into the hub, and this is the other part of the hub right here that comes through. It's kind of hard to see maybe, but this is a hole in the center of the wheel. So these two things come apart, and depending on if you had this part right here, if this was on the outside, the wheels are going to be, your tires are going to be further in towards the center of the tractor, making the whole thing narrower, which makes it less stable, but you could fit through narrower spaces. So I don't know if you're working in a vineyard or something like that, and you need to get between rows of plants, that would be useful. But for my use, I want them as wide as possible because I'm going up and down this steep driveway. The other thing is that there are different positions on the axle for the hub. So right here is a pin, and this pin goes through the hub right here and the axle, and there are holes in the axle for that thing to go through, and there's different, I think there are two holes. I think this is one of them right here, but it's filled with dirt. but that allows you to, it's like indexed positions on the hub where you can mount the wheels. And I think there's 2 holes, and then you can have the hubs inside, you know, mounted inside or outside of the rim. So that will give you 4 positions or 4 widths that you could choose from. Yeah, so this pin, it's one of these, this type of pin. I don't know if that's normally what's on there, but that's what came on this tractor. When I bought the tractor, this is all that was holding the wheels on. So this guy that I bought it from just was, you know, he was not, well, I don't want to talk too much about him, but the wheels were basically flopping around, and which made it also extremely unstable. And so that pin is just kind of like a safety thing, and maybe to help you locate the right position, and to keep the wheels from moving in, you know, in and out on the axle. But it's not really supposed to hold the wheel on. It's these 2 bolts right here that are tightened down onto these facets of the hexagonal axle. That's what really is keeping the wheel firmly attached to the axle. And these springs on here, I think, are just kind of like lock, the same concept as like a lock washer. Like they provide friction to keep the nuts, or the bolts from moving in or moving out, you know, becoming unscrewed. When I bought the tractor, because those bolts were not tightened down, the ends of the bolts had been eroded and essentially were too short to do anything. And so I had to go to the hardware store and get some longer bolts to replace them. They're just a little bit longer, you know, like 1/8 of an inch longer or something like that. And because before, with the bolts that were there, these springs would get compressed completely as you're tightening this in, and the end of the bolt was not making contact with this flat side of the axle here. So you need to make sure that there's some spaces between these parts of the spring, you know, like the loops of the spring there when you're tightening this, and these need to be really tight. Okay, so now I'll show you how I take off the wheel and to work on the brakes. I have this bottle jack, and that's what I use for lifting the axle. When you're doing it, I've found that it works best to have it sort of positioned on towards the body of the tractor, not out here, because I want, when I lift it up with this, then I want to put a jack stand under this part, and so I need space out here in order to put that in. So basically we get this jack positioned under here and start pumping it up. Okay, so then I kind of get it, you know, it's like set there and it's not really lifting or anything yet. Then I already took out this pin from here, and then I want to loosen these 2 bolts. Just want to loosen these, that you don't need to get them like really loose. Just need to be moved off of the off of those flat sides of the axle. Start pumping the jack up a little bit. And then you'll notice like the wheel starts, it's like real loose. And so you can tell, like you don't need to jack it up. You don't want to jack it up really high because it's going to make it hard to get this tire off. These tires are filled with water and they're really heavy. So be careful with your back when you're fooling around with these. The wheel should just slide off. The axle. Don't try to pick it up. Careful with your back and just roll it out of the way so that when you come back, it'll be in the correct orientation to get it back on that axle. And now the tractor right now is only being supported by that jack, which is not really super safe. So you want to get a jack stand under there. And do not put any part of your body underneath it until you get it supported by a jack stand. Like so. This jack stand with this U-shaped top piece that fits perfectly under here. And then we just carefully lower the jack and leave it so that both the jack and the jack stand are supporting the axle, and that's a much safer way to support the tractor. If you've worked on any like old vehicles before, they're drum brakes. I mean, the thing that's weird is like they're not inside the wheels. They're on the, I mean, I guess what would be considered the transmission. But this is on the driver's right side of the tractor. This plate right here is what covers the brakes. And, you know, Hoye tractor, who sells parts for these older Yanmar tractors, they have a video that talks about the how to replace the brake shoes, and so I'm not going to go into detail about that because they have a really good video about it. But basically this plate, the brake is inside of here. It's held on by these 4 nuts that are on studs, and this is the linkage right here that when you push on the brake pedal, this moves back and forth and you know, rotates a cam that's inside, and that applies the brakes. So let's go back to the other side of the tractor. So on this side, I already have the cover off, and you can see, you know, this is the brake drum right here. So when the wheels are turning, this thing is turning, and the brake shoes. This is that cover that we saw on the other side. These are the brake shoes inside of here, and now I can tell you what happened, why I have to do this again. So when you push on the brake pedal, this thing, you know, moves, okay? And inside you can see what happens. It just pushes, when it turns, pushes apart these things. Well, it didn't really, this whole assembly didn't fit well into the when I was putting it back onto the tractor. And so in the Hoye video, they say, oh, well, you might need to file these things, the ends of these brake shoes down. Well, I did it too much. And as you can see, this whole thing, the springs are not tight enough to keep these springs together, or to keep the shoes together, sorry, because I filed off too much there. So, live and learn. I had to buy another pair of these brake shoes, so I'm going to put those on and put everything back together, and hopefully it'll be good to go. But what happened was the brakes froze up. So I was trying to back out of the garage here, and the bottom one just dropped down. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain, but basically, because this whole thing was loose, this bottom shoe was just, in contact with this, the drum, and the wheel wouldn't turn. So that sucked. So I'm going to kind of clean this stuff up and put it all back together. Now, just one other quick note. There was some kind of moisture that was inside of here, and I'm really hoping that it was just water. It did not seem like oil. Apparently, the transmission fluid can leak out through a seal in the back, and that's behind, in here somewhere, and then it can kind of get into this area, and you don't want that. But I do not have a video of what these things looked like before, but I can probably superimpose a photo of how nasty they were, and you can get an idea of how much I had to clean these things. What I did not do, though, on this side was I didn't clean as well as I could behind here, around this drum. It'd be nice if you could just take that whole thing out of there, but I have a feeling it's kind of hard to do it. There's this washer here that's bent over, and I just don't feel like messing with that, having to put all that stuff back together. So I'm going to clean out around here with some Q-tips and some dental pick kind of things that I have, and then put it all back together, and then we'll see how well it works. One other thing that I want to mention is, if you're working on these brakes, do not use compressed air to blow out around here. They mentioned this in the Hoye video, which is good, but the old brake shoes used to use asbestos, and you don't want to be blowing that stuff into the air where you're working. So as I'm starting to clean this out, there's one thing I'm noticing. When I opened this, I took the cover off like last weekend, and it was all wet inside. It was really hard to tell if this was like oil or water that was in there, because it looked, it was like black, dirty, goo, and it really looked like it was oil. But when I, kind of like put it between my fingers, it didn't feel oily. It felt gritty and dry, not greasy. And so what I'm noticing is now, as I'm kind of cleaning this out around here with this pick, having this cover off for like a week, it's all dried out in here. So I think it was water that was inside of this that had just combined with all the brake dust, and it kind of looked like oil. But it's really good that it's not the, like, I'm pretty sure it's not the transmission fluid that was leaking out and getting inside of here, which apparently if you have that problem, then you have to take this whole thing out, and there's some seals that you need to replace. And so I don't know if you need to take apart like the whole transmission or something in order to do that, but probably have to take off at least like this side cover, I'm imagining. That would be a major pain. So yeah, feeling at least a little bit happy about that. Okay, so now got this back together. Springs on here. You know, if you're going to do this, if you're going to replace your brakes, you might as well order the whole kit, which for this tractor is just brake shoes, springs, and then this gasket that goes around the outside. So these are the new springs. Now you can see, you know, this whole thing is it's not flopping around like it was before. And then when you actuate this thing, the lever, it snaps back together. So I guess when you put this back in, it should have kind of a slightly snug fit. So let's see how that works. Now let's put this back on and see how it fits. So that goes on pretty well. Now this thing is it's not really moving, but I after things got messed up last time, I kind of get the feeling that when you start pressing on the brake, it's going to compress that brake shoe material a little bit, and then this is going to start moving more. So, I think I got a little overexcited about trying to file off this part right here, because in that Hoye the video they're talking about that. But then I found this article on their website that was kind of hidden, I thought, that said in 90% of the cases you don't need to file the shoes in order to get them to fit. That it's only rarely you need to do that. So try it this time without filing at all and see how it all works, and hopefully the tractor will move, unlike last time when this side got completely frozen. All right, well, it's kind of frustrating. Yeah, I was trying to back out and the right side is not moving, but the left side is. This tractor had a number of issues, and I've already addressed a bunch of them. But one of them is the differential lock, which is this thing in here. The pedal was frozen for that. Grab a flashlight. This is the pedal right here for the differential lock. That was frozen, and so I've been working on that, and now it's finally like, I don't know if I can move it with my hand, but if I put a wrench on there, I can move it. But what I wasn't sure about was whether the differential was locked or not locked. So what position the pedal was in. But I think the differential was locked. And then I removed the linkage that goes from the pedal back here to the differential lock where it goes into this housing. And this thing kind of like sprung back sort of, and which I think that's the sort of non-locked resting position. So now it's a little weird that like one of the tires will be turning and the other one isn't. And that never happened before, and I think it was because I took this linkage off. And so I think it means like things are kind of working, but I still need to get that pedal moving. And it's not quite there yet, so I'm gonna keep putting penetrating oil on that and loosening that. So yeah, try this linkage, loosening this linkage, and see if we can get this side freed up, and then maybe the tractor will move again. What I noticed over here is this tab. This is really easy to move. There should be some resistance there provided by those springs that hold the shoes together. So when I pull this, I should be forcing against those springs. So I have a feeling that these shoes might be jammed up against the drum, which it's a little scary because I don't know how I'm going to get this out. But started taking these nuts off. I'm going to do that, and then we'll see if we can get this cover off of here. Right, got this thing out. This was jammed in there, and I'm not sure why yet, but in order to get this off, I had to jack up the tractor in the center, and I put a piece of 2x4 on top of it to try to spread the weight out, because I don't know how strong these castings are here, but have all that weight concentrated on that little tiny part of the top of the jack seems a little bit sketchy. But anyway, got to figure out why these things are binding up. One thing I noticed on these new shoes is that they have this, there's this dark line that goes around both of them. And so I'm wondering if, I really cleaned out inside of here, but I'm just kind of wondering if something got jammed in there or if there's some irregularity on the drum. Yeah, so I want to see if so I don't know. This thing is a little tight in here, so I might try to. It's not really returning. Yeah, so I just turned this thing over. I'm not sure what's going on here, but this spring just fell out. It's not even. So that, that could be the problem right there, this spring. These two sides, sorry for the terrible camera angle, but these, oh yeah, so that's got to be the problem there. Look at that. If that happens, the wheel is just going to lock up completely. I think the spring, either I got a bad spring or it got stretched out or something. Luckily, I didn't throw out the old springs. The old spring is in the front. The new spring is in the back, and the new spring is way longer, mostly because it's stretched out, I think. But so I'm gonna put on that old spring and see if that works any better. Then the other thing is that this brake drum, it definitely has sort of like a groove or a bump in the center. And I'm not really, I don't think that really makes a difference. I mean, ideally this would be perfectly flat, but I don't have any way to grind this down. And I have a feeling that the shoe is just gonna sort of conform to that. But that's why you have these dark marks on here. It's not ideal, but it's what I can do right now. So I'm gonna put some penetrating oil on this pivot here, try to loosen that up a little bit, and then I'll put the used vintage spring on that's shorter, and hopefully it'll keep this stuff together, and then I think that will do it. These are these are new shoes that I bought, and these are old springs, which are actually shorter than the springs that I got, the new springs I got. Now there's two problems here. These springs are too long, the ones that I bought. And something with the casting on these shoes, it's uneven, or it's just like low quality. These holes, like this hole right here, I don't know if you can see it, it's really big. This hole's a little smaller. But the thing is, like, if this hole is too big, like you can see this spring, it's not doing anything. It's just barely in there. And the whole thing, if you shake that around, it's loose. And these springs barely, they're supposed to, you know, when you turn this lever on the other side here, this is supposed to kind of spring back. And it sort of does, but, you know, it goes like part of the way. It should go all the way. This should be completely solid, this thing, because with this flopping around in here, the bottom one, gravity is going to push it down, and that's going to be inclined to bind up on the brake drum, this bottom shoe. So I don't know if I can get shorter. I mean, if I had shorter springs, that would solve the problem. I'm going to try putting this back together and see if it works. If it doesn't, then, you know, I mean, I'm going to need to find some shorter springs somewhere. Okay, I can already tell this isn't going to work. This thing is just, you know, like sitting in here. The wheel, the tire's not turning, the axle's not turning. It's binding up. So it's frustrating. I mean, I guess I could try to maybe shave down the friction material, but I'd rather not have to do that. So yeah, I gotta think about this. I started looking on the internet for springs, thinking that maybe I need to buy some shorter springs, and then I started thinking, well, these springs, they're too long, but maybe I could bend them. I mean, I don't know that much about springs, really. It's not anything I've ever thought about a lot or bothered to read about. But I was able to bend this spring right here. And the way I did it was got some larger pliers and held on to it like this, and then some smaller pliers, and just kind of brought these end clips in a little bit. And what that did was shorten it just enough so that now this side is tight. So hopefully I can, that's one of the new springs that I ordered. The other new spring that I had, unfortunately, got stretched out. I think when the brake was sort of seized up, and so I don't know if this one's usable, but I'm going to try it with one of the original springs and see if I can shorten up the other side a little bit, and then hopefully that'll be done. And if it's still binding, then I'm going to chamfer these leading edges a little bit, and hopefully that will do it. All right. I think this might be working now. Got the shortened springs, so this is not rattling around. And then I filed the leading edges of these shoes, so they're just like barely tapered. The brakes are still binding up, but it's getting better. Springs are nice and tight still. I have been beveling the edges of these, the front edges of these brake shoes a little bit, and I think I'm going to continue to do that. But one thing I noticed, the brakes are, the wheel is turning pretty smoothly now, but it's still binding up a little bit. And I noticed that after I chamfered it, or filed down this part from here to here, you can see that just from spinning the wheel a little bit, it got these black marks. So, it started off when I filed it, it was really just the light brake shoe material, but it gets these dark marks from rubbing on the drum. And so I'm pretty sure this is where it's hanging up. So I'm just gonna lightly file a little bit more of the material, friction material off here, and I think I'm getting closer. So this is the second day I've been working on it this weekend. I also spent basically 3 days last weekend working on this. And so it's not, I was thinking, oh, it'll take me a few hours to do this, but yeah, it's with something equipment this old, and you kind of never know what, when you open it up, what it's going to look like inside. Yeah, I guess I'm not surprised, but I should have been more realistic about how long this would take. All right, I think I'm done. Hope I'm done. The wheel, I can turn the wheel now, pushing on this plate, because before that would kind of make it bind up. But yeah, now I can turn this back and forth, and there's no chattering or binding, which was happening before. What I ended up doing was I filed down these leading edges here. I also filed along the side here, because it was sticking out a little bit, and I thought it might be binding up on the like inside of the drum where it's not supposed to be touching. So put everything back together, and hopefully it's working now. Maybe I'll do a quick overview of some of the other things that I've done so far in this tractor. Replaced this fixed side link here because the other one was bent at the bottom. These sway chains here, where they attach, it's supposed to move up and down, and you can see it does. When I got the tractor, these were completely frozen solid with rust and would not move up and down. The chains, sway chains, were dangling several inches sort of down. Like, it was like just that, not doing anything. I switched the positions of these two things, and now you can tighten this. I'm not sure how that's gonna work. If I need to move this, or if I need to move this back here, put this here, then I'll shorten this chain, take a link out of it. These grease nipples, a lot of them were clogged, so I've been slowly going through and greasing everything and replacing some of the grease fittings where they needed to be replaced. The ignition switch was mounted incorrectly, and so you would have to hold on to this thing as you're turning, you know, this outside ring as you're turning the key with your other hand, which made it impossible to start really, because you need to pull out the decompression lever there. The headlight fuse kept blowing, and it turned out it was one of the headlight bulbs was bad. The tractor was not charging, so as it was running, every time you started it, it would just drain the battery a little bit, and the battery wasn't charging while it was running. And so I replaced the voltage regulator, and it took a while to get to that point. This exhaust was loose, so I put this exhaust clamp on. I put rain cap on the top, replaced the battery clamps for the battery cables. Those were stupid, the ones that were on there. This boot was completely busted, and so I got a new one of these. You know, I was desperate to get a tractor, and this was in my price range, and the guy was able to deliver it for me, which was a big deal because I don't have a trailer, and I don't have a truck that's really big enough right now to tow something like this. So that's why I ended up with this tractor, and I think it's really it's a good tractor, and it's going to be solid once I go through my list of all these things I need to do. So one of the problems that this tractor had when I bought it was that this differential lock pedal was frozen solid. Over the period of a few weeks, I was putting penetrating oil on the shaft where it pivots, and now this pedal actually moves up and down. I can even push it with my hand. So that's real satisfying to have that thing working. What I don't know is if it works, like if the function works, the differential lock. So that's going to be interesting to mess around with that. I think, you know, the few hours where I've been using the tractor on working on our driveway, that has been engaged basically. So I don't really know how it's going to be to operate it now. Yeah, so that'll be interesting to see, but it's really it's a good feeling to have that moving. So last weekend I worked on the brakes and did not have a chance to test them. I think really thinking that they should be working, hopeful. So I'm going to try out the tractor now and see if I can move it at least, and also the differential lock now. Pedal is moving, and so I'm going to see if that does anything. You know, when I was testing the tractor before, it went back a little bit and then it got stuck. And so what happened was it was part of the way out of the garage here, and I was kind of freaking out wondering what I was going to do if I couldn't move the tractor, and then I wouldn't be able to close the garage door. So let's hope that this time everything works and it's not stressful and exciting like that. All right, it's a bit frustrating. The left brake still seems like it's binding up. The differential lock seems to be working though, so that's pretty awesome. The brake, you know, I know I can deal with the brake. It's just a matter of either adjusting the pedal, or I don't know if I'm going to need to mess with the pads again, but yeah, so I feel like I'm getting close, and having the differential lock, yeah, so what was happening was the left wheel was locking up, and so I was able to push down the differential lock, and then the left wheel was moving a little bit, but it was still struggling, and I think it's because of the brakes locking up. So yeah, keep at it. The other thing is, this time I made sure that I didn't go halfway out of the garage. All right, I took off this brake assembly from the left side. You know, it's like I've been working on these brakes for so long, I kind of forgot what I already did, and opened this one up, and this was totally loose, and so I could just, like, it wasn't exerting any tension on these two holes here where it's attached. So I bent the spring a little bit, kind of pushed the ends in a little, and it seems to be quite a bit better now. One tool that's really handy for messing with these springs is this hook, spring hook, I guess you call it. And you can, with this, you can, it's really easy to get these things off when they are a bit tighter, and you can't just pull them off with your fingers. And I figured out a bit of a better way to work with these springs, to tighten them up a little bit. Just kind of grab on to one end of the coiled part, and then I can just squeeze it in a little bit, and it tightens it up, shortens it. So I beveled the front edges of these slightly, and and then looked for where it was sort of had this kind of glazed look. These springs are real tight now. You can see they're pulling the shoes back together. I just have this feeling like if this rear one is loose, this doesn't do much, but it has to keep the these two shoes around this pivot point here. It has to keep them pressed up against that. Otherwise, if these are flopping around, they're going to get jammed into the brake drums. So I don't know if that was what was happening or if it was the front edge, but anyway, I'm basically doing to this side what I already did to the other side. So we'll see if that helps. So I put this back in and turned the wheel, and it was still binding up. Now what you can see is, let's get something to point with. So that is what's binding up. So that needs to be taken down just a little bit more, and I think we're getting closer. It's still tight. It's still binding up. I'm gonna file a little bit more. So again, there's more of that black, shiny stuff from where it's rubbing, and that's just from turning the wheel, so it needs to come down a little bit more. All right, this is way better. It's just the wheel keeps going, and yeah, we're not binding up. One more tip or something I figured out. You know, these linkages, you screw them in and out and they get shorter or longer. That's how you adjust the brakes. Well, it's a lot easier to do that while the wheels are off the ground and you can turn them. Before I was dropping the tractor down and then trying to adjust those based on the manual. You know, there's supposed to be a certain amount of travel, like the pedal travel. Right, so the way I'm doing it now is just trying to get both sides kind of even, and when I put the brakes on, both sides will grab at the same point, and they're not binding. So, you know, maybe after using it for a while, I can adjust it. I'll probably need to adjust it again, but for now, I think the easiest way to do it is just sort of by feel and keeping it off the ground to be able to turn the wheels while you're pushing the pedals. All right, it's a week later or so. We're working on other projects on the tractor, but time to test the brakes and see if we can move this thing. All right, I'm so psyched. Yeah, the brakes worked. I don't know if you could tell in the video, but they were, it's kind of like binding up a little bit at first, but then once I got going, it seemed fine, and they work so much better now than they did before. So I think it's just going to be a completely different machine to operate. Really, I spent several weeks, not, like I wasn't working on it 40 hours a week, but several weekends in a row working on the brakes, and to just finally get it working and be able to stop properly. I haven't gone down our driveway yet, which is really steep, but I'll do that probably in the next few days, and because I got some work to do down there. So we'll see how that works, but I think that I'm calling this project finished for now. And there's a lot of pedal travel, which I think could be improved, but it works totally fine. And it feels so much safer now. So super excited about that.